Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving deep into a real cinematic landmark,
A very important one.
the 1988 film Rudraveena. And this is a bit of a special one since it comes from a listener request for a reflective overview.
Right. One that skips the spoilers but really delivers on the substance.
Exactly. So that's our mission today. We want to dissect its powerful social critique, the surprisingly risky production context.
And why it all remains such a talking point even now, decades later.
Absolutely.
And that mission feels critical because, you see, Rudraveena isn't just a film people love. It's really a foundational text for socially responsible cinema in South India.
That's a great way to put it.
The sources show the filmmakers, from the very start, embrace this idea that real change has to value dialogue over domination.
It sets a very specific tone, doesn't it?
It does. This is cinema as a moral compass, not just, an escape.
And I think that moral focus is what defines it. The film tackles huge issues, social conflict, generational divides.
Rigid hierarchies.
Exactly. But it centers them on one protagonist. This is someone who chooses the toughest path imaginable, ethical leadership.
Right, they're not trying to tear the system down with force.
Not at all. It's about reconstructing it through persistent, compassionate communication.
Yep.
And moral courage.
Which is such a compelling, dramatic setup. It moves the conflict away from a simple good versus evil story.
And into something more philosophical.
Yes.
Yeah.
It forces you, the audience, to really question established authority, especially when that authority is just propped up by fear or tradition.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start where the film itself started, with the production choices. I mean, what made this film so unconventional for 1988?
Well, you have to look at the director, K. Balachander.
Of course.
By 1988, the cinematic landscape was It was very structured. It was all about commercial formulas.
Predictable action scenes,
Yeah.
star power, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Things designed to guarantee a box office return.
And the sources really emphasize that Balachander intentionally pulled away from all of that. But what was the real-world cost of a decision like that? I mean, it sounds incredibly risky.
It was a huge risk. In that era, if you deviated from those commercial beats, you were risking financial disaster or, just audience rejection.
I see that.
The sources keep calling this move brave. Specifically, they note the film chose ideas over entertainment formulas.
That says a lot. It's a deliberate choice.
It's a choice to prioritize the message, the script's complexity, even if it meant losing part of the audience that just wanted a formulaic spectacle.
So instead of reacting to what the market was telling them to do, the film decided to tell the market what it maybe needed to hear.
Yes, and that really puts Rudraveena in a special place in media history.
It feels like a moment where commercial cinema consciously decided, okay, we're going to step up and engage seriously with social reform.
Absolutely, and that's so crucial for understanding its long-term significance. When cinema does that, it takes on this vital role in public discourse.
It becomes a platform.
It becomes a platform to question norms and encourage reflection, not just passive viewing. Rudraveena really used its medium to challenge how the audience understood leadership and societal duty.
So the intent was clear. But what about the execution? If the film was so message-driven, how did it actually structure that message?
Let's transition into decoding that core conflict, but, keeping it spoiler safe.
Okay, so when we look at the central tension, the film is exploring conflict on two fronts. You have the societal conflict and you have the generational one.
But there's an underlying issue, right?
There is. The real issue is the protagonist's mission to confront this massive entrenched authority. And that authority, the sources tell us, gets its power from tradition and, critically, from fear.
Okay, this is where it shifts from just a drama into more of a moral philosophy test. What exactly is the film testing?
The central question it's posing is, it's very nuanced. It's basically asking, does power that's rooted only in fear?
So, enforcing tradition through intimidation. Exactly. Does that kind of power actually create meaningful, lasting social change? The film then contrasts that fear-based authority with the protagonist's, revolutionary approach.
And that approach, as you said, is all about dialogue. It's about communication and, maybe most importantly, ethical consistency.
Precisely. The protagonist is effectively showing that for structural change to happen, you need a moral architecture to support it.
That's interesting.
The sources really highlight that the film's power comes from showing the virtues you need for this kind of reform. Nonviolence, social responsibility, good communication.
And just genuine moral courage, right?
Right.
Especially when you're facing backlash in the system.
Yes.
So here's where it gets really interesting for me. By focusing on dialogue and nonviolence, the film makes a very conscious statement.
Was it hard to sell a film that rejected that, cinematic satisfaction of revenge or a big violent confrontation?
That is an excellent point. It was a conscious thematic choice to say violence is not a viable long-term solution.
It's quick, but the film argues it's ultimately ineffective for any deep societal healing. So instead, the focus shifts entirely to education, to empowerment, and to maintaining that ethical high ground.
Sticking to your principles even when it costs you.
Exactly. And that unwavering dedication to principled reform, rather than just an emotional or violent reaction, is why so many observers called the film ahead of its time.
Because it wasn't just treating the audience as consumers of entertainment.
It was treating them as potential participants in reform.
So it's asking for a higher level of engagement from the audience. It's demanding that you consider the power and also the vulnerability of trying to create change through dialogue when you're up against a system that uses fear as its main weapon.
It holds up a mirror and asks you to think about your own commitment to those values. It's a very sophisticated argument for a popular film to make.
So if the film was making such a sophisticated, unconventional argument, how did that go over at first? Let's talk about its legacy, its relevance, and what audiences actually thought about it.
Well, the sources confirm that initial risk we talked about. Because it was so unconventional at release, it didn't immediately become this huge commercial blockbuster.
Right. Audiences were used to the formulas.
They were. They needed time to process a story that traded simple spectacle for, a deep philosophical exploration.
So modest immediate success, but then the long-term impact just grew and grew. What do you think drove that?
I think it was a recognition of its sincerity and its relevance. The film's message didn't feel like a passing fad. It addresses these fundamental human dynamics.
It's timeless.
It is. So as the years went on, its place as a cornerstone of socially conscious Telugu cinema just solidified. It proved that cinema could take on these serious topics of reform without being, dry or academic. The message was just too genuine to fade away.
That delayed appreciation is often the sign of a really insightful piece of work, isn't it? Something the world needs a little time to catch up to.
I think so. And the audience feedback we have from the sources really confirms that cognitive effect. People don't just talk about the plot of Rudraveena, they talk about the experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. One piece of feedback we saw noted that it's a film that makes you think rather than react.
And that's a hallmark of media that inspires critical engagement, right? It's about introspection, not just an emotional release.
It is. And another person noted its power today, saying it's still relevant in how it talks about leadership and responsibility.
So why do you think a film from 1988 still speaks so clearly to modern ideas of leadership? What does this all mean for us now?
I think the enduring impact is tied directly to its focus on ethical consistency. Leadership isn't a static thing. It's a constant challenge to maintain your principles under pressure.
And Rudraveena has sort of codified that challenge.
It did. The protagonist had to be the change they wanted to see. And that message, that real leadership comes from moral courage, not brute force, is just timeless.
It encourages critical thought.
It does. It rejects that passivity of pure entertainment and replaces it with an intellectual and ethical challenge.
So it sounds like the film succeeded not by changing everyone's mind overnight, but by giving them a framework to think about and to challenge existing power structures over time.
That's the power of cinema in this tradition. It used its platform to champion dialogue, moral consistency, and social responsibility, all within a narrative that people could connect with.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly review the key takeaways you should carry with you from Rudraveena. This is more than just a film analysis. It's a real case study in media history.
I think so. We've talked about the necessity of moral courage when you're facing fear-based authority. We've seen the argument for nonviolence as the best tool for lasting societal change.
And the central takeaway?
It remains that fundamental idea. True reform has to be driven by dialogue and education, not by domination.
This film really is a compelling case study. It shows how media can shape culture by choosing to prioritize challenging ideas over the safety of commercial formulas.
And because of that brave choice at the start,
it managed to achieve this deeply meaningful, enduring relevance that a standard, formulaic film just never could.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If dialogue and ethical consistency really are the strongest foundations for lasting social change, as Rudraveena argues.
What's the responsibility of storytelling today?
Exactly. What responsibility does contemporary storytelling have to show us protagonists who choose that difficult, principled path of reform over, the quick, violent solution? Are we seeing that kind of courage reflected in today's media landscape?
That's definitely something to mull over.
It is.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.